Hello, Generally Bad Gamer back here, and this time going to discuss some more Tome of Champions 2021 for Warcry. This time, I will talk about the Underworld warbands from Destruction. Once again, I will talk about their abilities, pros that I think they have, cons that I think they have, and anything else that comes to mind. To start off with, we have Zarbag's Gitz. Their abilities, they have two of them. The first one is a double, and I think it is pretty good and interesting. Pick a visible enemy fighter within 9 inches of this fighter. That is within 1 inch of a friendly fighter, so that's engaged with a friendly fighter. That enemy fighter must make a bonus disengage action. If they cannot do so, allocate d6 damage points to the enemy fighter. I like this ability. It's unique. I don't think we've seen it before in Warcry. It forces an enemy model to disengage, so it can free up one of your models that you want to be freed up when you can't guarantee you can kill it. So if you have a big model tying up one of your bigger models, you can force them to disengage. It's awesome. I love it. I think it's great. It is on Zarbag himself, the leader. Their second ability is fine. It's a quad. Allocate a number of damage points equal to the value of this ability to all visible enemy fighters within 3 inches of this fighter. That is on Snurk, the Zealot, so the Git with the ball and chain there. And it's pretty standard. There's several other factions that have this ability. It's good for some AoE damage around the model if you need it, but it's a quad, so... And the Gits also have an absolutely amazing quad, so... I don't know how often this would get used over that absolutely amazing quad that's just a better rampage. Now the pros to Zarbag's Gits are that they add some interesting stuff to the Gits themselves. Zarbag has that double, which is really awesome and unique. That's something brand new to the game, forcing a disengage. There are drags that I would have to look up the rules are. I don't even know if you could drag somebody out of engagement with a model with how the rules are at the moment. I'd have to look that up. But this forces a disengage, and if they absolutely cannot do the disengage, it at least forces some damage. Then we have Snurk, the fanatic with the ball and chain there. He is such a fantastic and amazing model. His model looks sweet, but his stats are disgusting. He's 130 points, the standard 4 movement, 3 toughness for a Gitz, 10 hit points, so he's pretty squishy, which is right on point for a fanatic. His attack profile is what is disgusting. He's got a 3-inch range, so he could still use Onslaught if he wanted to. 4 attacks at strength 4 at 3/6 damage for each one of those. That damage profile for 130 points is amazing. Now, the cons to this warband are the shooters and netters. I don't think are worth the extra points over the generic versions. They are more points than the generic versions, and they get a few more hit points, but once again, for netters and shooters, you're using more of a support role, so I don't think the extra hit points are worth the points a lot of the times. So that's the biggest con to this warband. Next, we have Mollog's Mob. I'm biased, I will say that. I love the Mollog model. I am probably going to say a bunch of things about this warband that I absolutely adore. I'm trying to make it as unbiased as possible, but that's my warning. Now, Mollog himself gets 3 abilities. The first one is very meh. It's just a generic, or as I misspelled there, generica ranged attack. Pick a visible enemy fighter within 6 inches of this fighter and roll 2 dice. For each 4 to 5, allocate 1 damage point to that fighter. For each 6, allocate a number of damage points equal to the value of this ability to that fighter. This ability is everywhere in Warcry, and most of the time it's very mediocre. There are a couple of times where it will be nice, but overall, whatever. His other doubles where we start to get interesting. It is Summon Stalagdsquig. So this will actually use that Stalagdsquig model that we see at the very bottom of the picture. That is a placeholder model for this ability and not an actual fighter in the game itself. For this ability, a fighter can only use this ability once per battle. Pick a point on a platform or on the battlefield floor within 3 inches of this fighter, so 3 inches of Mollog, that is more than 1 inch away from all enemy fighters, and set up the Stalagdsquig marker. Allocate 2d6 damage points to the first enemy fighter to move within 1 inch of the marker, then remove the marker. So it's not a lot of damage, it's not a huge area that it cuts off, but it can still be very interesting for securing some areas or just kind of roadblocking some areas, adding a bit of a deterrent for especially chaff models to want to move close to it. I like it, it's interesting, and it's a double, so it's pretty cool. Now his triple is what I'm really excited about. I think it's really good, possibly amazing. It is Summon Spite Shroom, so it's going to use that smoking mushroom model that we see on the right there. A fighter can only use this ability once per battle. Pick a point on a platform or on the battlefield floor within 3 inches of this fighter that is more than 1 inch from all enemy fighters, and set up the Spite Shroom marker. Subtract 1 from the attack characteristics to a minimum of 1 of attack actions made by enemy fighters while they are within 6 inches of the Spite Shroom marker. Fighters cannot end a move on the Spite Shroom marker. So there are several other abilities in Warcry that are triples that have the same effect. You would use it, and enemy models within 6 inches of the model that used it would subtract 1 from the attack dice that they get during an attack action. This I like a lot more for 2 reasons. One, you could put it on a point, and then if you want, you can move away from that point. And sometimes that's going to be a downside because it doesn't move with you, but I think more often than not, you can make it an upside. Now, the even better part about this ability is that once that marker's on the battlefield, it is on the battlefield and it stays there. It is a consistent, constant debuff. And this is fantastic because what this means is at the start of the next round after you use this ability, it's still there. So if you don't go first, your opponent's still suffering from this debuff or if they're within 6 inches of it. It is just there for good. There is no way that I see to get rid of this model. It does not end at the end of the battle round. That is fantastic. Now, the pros of this warband, besides the triple that I just gushed over, is that it's Mollog. I love Mollog. He is a big, awesome looking model. He is 330 points. His defensive profile is pretty good. Toughness 5, 35 hit points. His damage profile is astounding, 510. Now he only gets 2 attacks with that, though. But if you have the triple going, now you're looking at his 2 attacks at that awesome damage profile versus whatever he's fighting at -1 attack. And there's no activating before him to make sure you get your full amount of attacks after he's put it down if both him and the enemy are within that 6 inches of the marker. And like I just got done saying, I think his triple is the best attack debuff in the game, just because it is always there, consistently there. Now, cons are, Mollog is a lot of points. As I said, he's 330 points. There's a lot that you can do with 330 points. And also, if you're just not a big fan of big, hard-hitty, sluggish models, he's not going to be your thing. Another con is that bat squig that we see on the left side there is really not great for its points. It is 205 points, which means it is 60 points more than a normal squig. Actually, 60 or 65. 60 more than Zarbag's squigs. 65 more than a generic squig. And all it gets over them is 2 inches of movement and flying. 60 and 65 points for 2 inches of movement and flying is a lot of points to pay for that. So I don't think the bat squig's worth it at all. Next, we have Rippa's Snarlfangs. So they have 2 abilities also. The first one I think is meh. It's Any of them can use it. Pick a visible enemy fighter within 1 inch of this fighter and roll 2 dice. For each 4 to 5, allocate 1 damage point to that fighter. For each 6, allocate a number of damage points equal to the value of this ability to that fighter. So it is that bad range attack that I just talked about that Mollog has, but it's not even a range attack. It's within 1 inch of them. So if you need a little extra damage and you don't want to use an action to finish off a model, maybe that's already close to you or something like that, it could be useful, but I don't think it's useful most of the time for your ability dice. Their quad is just bad. Once again, any of them can use it. Until the end of this fighter's activation, the next time this fighter finishes a move action within 1 inch of an enemy fighter, pick a visible enemy fighter within 1 inch of this fighter. Allocate a number of damage points equal to the value of this ability to that fighter. So this is also a pretty common ability in Warcry, though for I'm pretty sure every other warband in existence that has this ability, it is a triple. This used to be a quad also on Legions of Nagash, one of their mounted units, but then it is now a triple for Soulblight Gravelords. So this being a quad when everybody else gets it for a triple is really, really bad. Especially when Gitz have arguably the best quad in the game, just for their warband in general. I can't ever see using this over Rampage or the Gitz quad. Now the pros are, these models are sweet. Everybody that likes goblins or destruction in general will probably love these models. These are sweet models. Also, the 2 mooks are fast for their points. You're looking at 115 points and 130 points for the 2 mooks, and they are speed 8. They're pretty durable with 18 hit points, only 3 toughness, and one has a range attack. So for their points, they're pretty quick, especially if you need something that's fast for objectives and you can't quite afford a squig hopper, which squig hoppers I believe are all around 200 points after the points change. So these are considerably less points than that. The leader himself, Rippa, he's 180 points, so he's starting to get to that point where he's probably not worth it over a squig hopper. The cons are the abilities are not great at all. Their damage is also pretty low for their points. You're looking at damage values on the 2 mooks of 1-4, 1-2, 1-4, with 3 or less attacks on each one of those damage profiles for over 100 points. That's not great. Rippa himself gets 4 attacks at strength 3, that's 2-4. That's okay. But once again, his point value is to where you would probably be better off taking a squig hopper or a bounder. And the other downside is that these models are mounted. So that's a pretty big downside for when you're playing Red Harvest or normal Warcry because they can't climb. It might be a bit of a boon, though, in Catacombs as they have the larger base size, so you can block off more areas of that. Next, we have Hrothgom's Mantrappers. Their abilities are fine and also interesting. They could the second one, which I'll get to in a second, is possibly also even good. The more I think about it, the more I like it. The first ability is a double, and it is the same as Mollog's second double, so I think it's fine and interesting. A fighter can only use this ability once per battle. Pick a point on a platform or on the battlefield floor within 3 inches of this fighter that is more than 1 inch away from all enemy fighters, and set up the Bushwhacker's trap marker, which is the little trap that you see in the lower left there. Allocate 2d6 damage points to the first enemy fighter to move within 1 inch of the marker, then remove the marker. So it is the Nobbler with the traps in his hands that sets that up. So the cool thing about this, it's a fine and interesting ability. It's the same fine and interesting ability that Mollog has, but it's on a 40-point model as opposed to a 330-point model. So this model was pretty easy to fit into stuff, into your already existing ogre list, to other ogre lists, wherever you can fit it. 40 points, pretty easy to fit in. He's an extra body, and he's got a little bit of area denial in his trap. That's pretty sweet. I like that. The triple is good. And like I say, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm really starting to like it a lot more. It is. A fighter can use this ability only if they're within 2 inches of a friendly Hrothgom Mantrapper. And this ability is only on the Nobbler that has the giant crossbow bolts. So he's the only one that has it. That Hrothgom Mantrapper makes a bonus attack action that has a ranged weapon room mark. So the Nobbler with the giant bolts, if he's within 2 inches of Hrothgorn, he can use a triple, and Hrothgorn will make a bonus range attack. Now, Hrothgorn's range attack is pretty mean. It's a 3 to 9 inch range, so it's got one of those limited ranges that sometimes is hard to pull off. But if you can get them within range, it is 2 attacks at 6 strength, that's 4-8 damage. That is a hard hitting range attack. And then, if you're set up to where Hrothgorn is still within range of something, you can do Here You Go, Boss. And then I also believe Hrothgorn should be able to use the leader ability of the ogres that if he kills something with that range attack, I think it's a double. I could be wrong on this because I don't have the book directly in front of me for that ability. For a double, he can make another range attack. So you're looking at a bunch of these high damage range attacks from Hrothgorn, even though they're only medium distance. So that could be pretty good. Pros of this warband, very good entry for new players. You get a hard-hitting range model in Hrothgorn. His melee stats aren't as good as most ogres. He only gets 3 attacks at strength 4 that are 2-4 damage. That's not great compared to other ogres. It is better than the Lead Belcher's melee attack. His range attack is phenomenal, though. He's got interesting abilities. So the Lay Man Trap, the double that the Trapper Nobbler has, is cool. The triple that the other Nobbler of the Bolts has is pretty awesome because it'll give Hrothgorn another range attack. Hrothgorn himself has the ability that lets him give a beast within so many inches of him. I think it's 3 inches or something close like that. Bonus attack action. So his Frost Saber there would be able to get bonus attack actions from Hrothgorn. Like the warband works, synergizes pretty well in itself. It's interesting. I like it. I think it's a good starting point. It could also be some good alternate play points for ogre players. Cons, I'm not sure if it's better than just going with a Thunder Fist with normal Nobblers and a Yeti. Because the Yeti and this Saber Cat are the exact same point cost, I think, and the Yeti gets a charge ability, which is phenomenal. And a Thunder Fist is 250 points, and its range attacks are really mean also. And they're a bit longer range. They don't hit as hard, but they get an extra attack, and they're longer range. So it's a toss-up. I think the Thunder Fist with Nobblers and Yeti might still be better than Hrothgorn, but Hrothgorn's an interesting option. Next, we have Hedkrakka's Madmob, the Bone Splitters Underworld warband. They have 2 abilities. The first one I think is good, and even if you don't think it's good, I think it's interesting. It is pick a visible enemy fighter within 12 inches of this fighter, so within 12 inches of Hedkrakka himself. Until the end of the battle round, add 3 to the damage points allocated by each critical hit for attacks that target that fighter. So 3 extra damage for each critical hit is pretty big, especially when it's anybody that's attacking that model gets that bonus. So, and I didn't say what it was because I forgot to type it in there. It is a triple. So I think it's pretty good for a triple, and I definitely think it's interesting. It can let you take a mob of Boyz or even a couple shootas and go for some crit fishing on something and end up with some big damage if you get a couple crits. I like it. And it's a different, unique, new ability to the game, I believe. His quad, I think, is also good, and this, once again, is an ability that Hedkrakka himself can use. Pick a visible enemy fighter within 12 inches of this fighter and roll a number of dice equal to the value of this ability. For each 2+, allocate 3 damage points to that fighter. So that part's okay. And it is a range attack of 12 inches. If you have a value of 5 or 6 on your dice, you can get a decent amount of damage. Now, there is a second part to this ability. If the enemy fighter is within 3 inches of Hedkrakka, it's allocate 5 damage points to that fighter for each 2+ instead. So if he's within 3 inches of an enemy, and you have a value of 5 or 6 that you're rolling for, you're looking at 20, 25, possibly 30 damage from this quad, which is a ton of damage. Like, that quad is pretty awesome. The pros, there are some new model options here. Hedkrakka himself is another shaman type ability. He has one of the other rune marks. Unfortunately, I don't have my destruction book on me at the moment as I'm recording this, so I don't know what this other rune mark adds. But he has another rune mark which likely lets him use another ability from the normal Bone Splitter's abilities. He brings 2 unique abilities to the game. I like Hedkrakka himself. I think he's sweet. His mooks, the Tooth Dagger, the one with the 2 claw weapons, he's not bad. He's 105 points, 4 attacks, 4 strength, 1/5 damage profile. I would say he's probably better than a normal Warboy. I mean, not Warboy, Moorboy. So probably better than a normal Moorboy. Just because he has 4 attacks and his crit is 5 damage. Wallop the Skull, the one with the axe, 120 points. So you're starting to get up there where he might be more points than he's worth versus some of the other boys. 3 attacks, strength 5. He does have a 2/5 damage profile, so he's still probably a pretty decent option. The only one I don't like, and this is definitely down in the cons now, is the Shuda is a lot more points than a generic Shuda would be. So I don't think I would ever use this Shuda from Hedkrakka's mob over a generic Shuda, because he's just more points for 1 more hit point and not a whole lot else. Maybe he gets an extra point in crit, but I'm pretty sure he's at least 20, if not more points than a normal Shuda. And I said except Shuda, worse than generic Shudas. Yeah, I don't know why I said except Shuda there. Once again, quality checking what I'm typing out might be useful in future recordings. Anyhow, on to Morgok's Crushes. Now, they have one ability, and it is bad. It is probably the worst, most niche, and useless ability of all the Underworld warbands. It is a triple. A fighter can use this ability only if they are within 1 inch of a visible enemy fighter with the Gargantuan rune mark. This fighter can make a bonus attack action that targets that fighter. So their ability only affects Gargantuan enemy models, can only be used against those, which are not used in match play, which are probably rarely used in a narrative. So it's a very niche ability that's just It's so niche, it is hardly ever going to be used. The pros, they are sweet looking models. I love these models, especially the one in the back with the 2-handed club. He is awesome. The cons, however. Generic brutes have just received a point decrease. So these guys, in comparison to them, are overcosted, especially when you consider the fact that their ability does absolutely nothing virtually all the time. So, for the most part, you're better off taking generic brutes. And as I have already stated several times, their ability is just horrible and never going to get used. Finally, we have Ironskull's boys. Their ability is fine. It's the same as one of the Stormcast abilities. It's a double, subtract 1 from hits and crit hits until end of turn. Makes them more durable. I personally think it's a little more useful on them than the Stormcast, because the boys cost less, and they don't have as many hit points and aren't as tough as a Stormcast. So this ability makes a bigger difference on them than I think the Stormcast does, and spending a double on one of these models to become more durable costs you less an opportunity than spending it on a model that's 30, 40, 50, 60, so on forth, more points than a boy. So the pros, the ability is good enough to take these boys as an upgrade to normal boys, generic boys if you have the spare points. There's one that's only 5 more points than a generic boy. There's one that's 10 more points, and there's one that's 20 more points. So if you have a few extra points laying around after you build your list and you're running a boy, you might as well upgrade one of them to one of these guys just for the opportunity to use that double if it ever comes up. Cons, they don't do anything that's really new or exciting for Ironjawz. They're a little more survivable for a little more points because of the double and because of one extra hit point. It looks like there's 16 hit points instead of 15 hit points. So not super exciting, though still much better opportunity than Morgok's Crushes. All right, that is it for the review of the Destruction Underworlds warbands that have come to Warcry. Once again, if you are interested in this content, keep an eye out for more coming in the future. Also, check out other content creators for Warcry. And if you want to discuss more or find out more about Warcry in general, check out the Warcry Reddit forums. And also on those forums, there should be a sticky post that will direct you to the Discord. Definitely check out the Discord because the group of people that are on the Discord on a regular basis are good people. All right, everybody have a good one. This is the Generally Bad Gamer out.